To understand the Philippines, you have to look at the map of its geography. Spread across 300,000 square kilometers of the Western Pacific Ocean, the country isn't a single landmass, but a fragmented collection of 7,641 individual islands. This animated map illustrates exactly why the land is so shattered. The archipelago sits directly on the western edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a 40,000-kilometer horseshoe of geologically active plate boundaries. Here, massive tectonic plates converge from multiple directions, generating constant seismic tension and feeding the country's 24 active volcanoes. That geological friction divides the country into 3 broad geographic zones. To the north lies Luzon, the largest and most populous island group. In the center are the Visayas, a dense web of smaller islands, and to the south sits Mindanao. Because these islands are separated by deep ocean trenches, plant and animal life here evolved in extreme isolation. This created an environment of mega diversity. Of the estimated 13,500 plant species and hundreds of mammals, reptiles, and amphibians found here, about 67% are endemic, meaning they exist naturally nowhere else on Earth. You can see that adaptation in the carabao, a swamp-dwelling water buffalo specifically suited to the hot, marshy climate of the islands. It requires immense strength to plow through the heavy mud of flooded rice terraces, earning the carabao its status as the national animal and a lasting symbol of raw perseverance. Living on a fractured map constantly threatened by typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions means that survival requires flexibility. Long before modern borders were drawn, the environment itself trained the earliest inhabitants to build communities that could absorb and withstand natural extremes. The first human arrivals, including the Negritos, who were later followed by waves of Austronesian migrants, settled into these isolated pockets. Over centuries, they established distinct, self-sustaining island kingdoms driven by animism, early Hinduism, and Islam, connecting with each other and neighboring empires primarily through heavy maritime trade. That fragmented network was violently interrupted in 1521 by the arrival of the explorer Ferdinand Magellan. Shortly after, Spanish explorer Ruy López de Villalobos officially claimed the islands, naming them Las Islas Filipinas in honor of King Philip II of Spain. Over the next 3 centuries, Spanish colonizers imposed a sweeping administrative structure over the thousands of separate islands. They introduced Catholicism, which quickly became the dominant religion, and transformed the capital city of Manila into a massive western hub for the trans-Pacific galleon trade. By the late 19th century, a shared sense of frustration with Spanish rule began to bridge the gaps between different regional and ethnic groups. Intellectuals like José Rizal wrote scathing critiques of colonial abuses, providing the ideological fuel for the Philippine Revolution of 1896. Spain arrived to exploit a divided archipelago, yet by enforcing a single religion, building connective trade routes, providing a common target for rebellion, they inadvertently handed thousands of distinct island kingdoms the exact tools they needed to conceptualize themselves as a single nation. That emerging independence was cut short. The 1898 Spanish-American War ended with Spain ceding the territory to the United States. When Filipino revolutionaries rejected this handover, it triggered the Philippine-American War, a brutal conflict that ended with the U.S. firmly controlling the islands. The decades of American administration that followed introduced a completely different set of cultural imports. The U.S. established a sprawling public education system and embedded the English language into the government and economy, where it remains an official language today. During World War II, the Japanese Empire invaded the archipelago. The ensuing occupation and the American campaign to retake the islands left the country devastated. By the time the Philippines finally achieved full independence in 1946, its capital, Manila, was one of the most thoroughly destroyed cities in the world. To see how these overlapping empires actually shaped the people, you just have to look at the food. Take adobo, the unofficial national dish. The cooking method, stewing meat in vinegar and soy sauce, has Malayo-Polynesian roots, but the dish borrows its name from the Spanish marinade, utilizes Chinese condiments, and is often cooked with ingredients brought over via American trade ships. successive waves of colonization did not overwrite the indigenous population. Instead, Filipinos absorbed the languages, religions, and customs of their conquerors, localized them, and layered them together to create a complex, highly adaptable modern identity. Independence did not guarantee stability. The post-war decades were marked by intense political friction, which peaked between 1972 and 1981, when President Ferdinand Marcos placed the entire country under martial law, ruling as a dictator and suppressing civil liberties. The breaking point arrived in 1986. Millions of civilians poured into the streets of Manila in a massive campaign of nonviolent resistance known as the People Power Revolution. The sheer volume of the crowds successfully toppled the dictatorship and restored democratic elections. The engine behind that kind of mobilization is a cultural concept called pakikisama, a deep-seated prioritization of social harmony. In Philippine society, kinship, community acceptance, and loyalty to one's extended family almost always outweigh formal institutional divides. You see this communal drive everywhere, even in the country's pastimes. Basketball, introduced during the American colonial period, is played at amateur and professional levels across the country. It functions as a universal social glue, creating shared experiences that cut entirely across class lines. During periods of severe political and economic turmoil, the country did not collapse into permanent factionalism. The ingrained cultural requirements of pakikisama and utang na loob, a lifelong debt of gratitude owed to those who help you, formed an invisible safety net that kept the society intact. Today, the Philippines is aggressively pivoting away from its agricultural past. It is categorized as a newly industrialized country and sits firmly as one of the fastest-growing emerging markets in the world. This chart shows exactly how that transition happened. Notice the steady decline of agriculture's contribution to the GDP, mirroring the exponential growth of the service sector. The Philippines is now a global leader in the business process outsourcing, or BPO, industry, where foreign companies contract out massive IT and customer support operations to a highly English-proficient workforce, which also happens to be the most active internet user base on the planet. The national motto of the Philippines translates to, "For God, people, nature, and country." It is a literal checklist of the forces that shaped the archipelago over thousands of years. The history of the Philippines is defined by the geography of a shattered land, the volatility of the Ring of Fire, and the turbulence of successive global empires. By absorbing those extremes rather than fighting them, the nation turned a history of survival into the blueprint for a highly adaptable, fiercely connected modern future.